Hello, I'm Will Yeoman and welcome to another episode of the pod Well Travelled, where I'm joined today by travel editor Stephen Scourfield, who is here to give us a new definition of the term adventure travel. Stephen, welcome back.
It's good to be back. It's good to be
in
back.
one piece.
Yeah, well, it's good to be out, but it's good to be back. Yes, look, the end destination, of course, was Antarctica, or more specifically, the Antarctic Peninsula, which is the bit that pokes north, sort of south of South America. So the peninsula the geology is an extension of the Andes. So this sets the scene. So you've got that big triangle of South America pointing south, and you've got the Antarctic Peninsula pointing north, and 1,000 kilometres of the Drake Passage in between.
Right.
So we're going to Ushuaia to get on a ship, the Aurora Expedition ship Greg Mortimer, to sail south to the peninsula. So, I mean, that's what the game's all about. But it's 4 flights there and it's 4 flights back. And I must say that, as you've just said, getting there is a bit of an adventure anyway. Well, it has been. Yeah.
So it sounds like it's a series of adventures, each with their own sort of challenges.
It is. Look, I think there's a wider picture here. Whether you're going to Ushuaia or not, and probably not many people are.
Yes.
There's a wider picture here to be explained about travel at the moment.
Yes.
And that is that, I mean, we all know that industries are short of staff. I mean, it's kind of the global story, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's particularly so in the travel industry, where lots of people were, put on hold, stood down, made redundant, companies closed. So a lot of people left travel during the height of the pandemic, shall I put it that way? And I mean, we're still in the tail end of the pandemic's effects, very much so. So a lot of people left the industry and went and made themselves new careers in other industries. I mean, a lot of people that I know, in the travel industry, begrudgingly left because it was their passion and their career.
Absolutely.
But they've gone into something else and they're committed to that. So they're not coming back because it's risky. It's not well paid. And we're talking about ticketing companies for airlines, travel agencies, obviously, but hotels, concierge, all these sort of.
But basically, every chain in the link is affected.
Yeah, every link in the chain.
Every link in the chain. Sorry, every chain in the link.
Pesky words, right? I know, it's just getting them in the right order. It's such a problem.
Yeah.
I spent my whole career trying to do that. So just to explain, so for example, there was a problem with ticketing on the airlines where the ticketing had been loaded in a particular way that meant it was alphabetical, which is not helpful if you've got couples with different surnames. And you've got every plane is full. I mean, there's no seat on any plane anywhere. So once everything's locked up, your chances of moving come down to asking people when you get on the plane sometimes saying, are you on your own? Because I'm sitting 5 forward and trying to shuffle around. Hotels, misbookings, coaches not turning up, these sorts of things. So what you've got is you've got an industry, as you say, with all these component industries, with fewer people. A lot of the people who are in that industry now have come into travel, booking systems and so on, are new. They are massively overworked because you can't get enough people. So even for experienced people, this would be a very, very trying and
exactly. Not because of the staff shortage, but as you mentioned too, the new technology that they're grappling with.
That's right.
Even if they are experienced.
That's right. And, we all know with our phones, I mean, trying to do this, that or the other thing with the phone is becoming more and more complicated. We've got two-step authentication for everything and blah, blah, blah.
And to be fair, it is a lot of it's down to security.
A lot of it's down to security.
Because of what's been going on with hacking and so forth.
Exactly right. So much more complex systems.
Yes.
So you've now got new people under massive stress with probably triple the workload that they deserve, using more and more complex systems. So if you're booking a coach with a ground operator in Buenos Aires, for example, you're doing that through a booking system. Booking a hotel, the same as we would. So if you don't tick a box or if something goes wrong, you don't actually know until a coach doesn't turn up, or you turn up at the desk and they go, well, you're not sitting together. You see your tickets. You don't actually know there's a problem until it manifests, which is often too late to solve it. So travel is very difficult. You've got postponed flights, delayed flights. You've got long queues so I just did 8 flights. I would say generally you've got long queues at passport controls, all sorts of border controls. You can have 11 flights landing and 3 people at the desk. You know, they're under stress, so they're a bit surly perhaps. And then you've got to do a photograph on your thumb. Security.
Yeah, exactly.
So, everything's more complex. So getting there was an adventure sport.
So already. And then,
and I think that's look, if you're doing a single hop, if you're flying from, in our case, Perth to London direct, or you're flying, the plane takes off on time, everything's going to be fine.
It shouldn't be an issue, you're right.
But 4 flights and going through South America and connecting between 2 airlines and this and that.
There's a lot that can go wrong in between.
And I say everyone's under pressure. And no one's in this game. No one's in travel because they want to give you an unpleasant time. Everyone's doing their best. I think it's really fundamental to remember that. So, of course, we were going from Ushuaia, so we've now got to Ushuaia. We're going down to the peninsula, it's the classic Antarctic trip. Okay. It's fantastic. So you're going to do 2 days across the Drake Passage, generally, or a bit less, 6 or 7 days, whatever it is, on the peninsula, going to places like Paradise Bay, Cuvier Island, Nico Harbour, brilliant sights through the Lemaire Channel. You're going to see lots and lots of penguins. You're going to see lots of icebergs. You're going to get into zodiacs, which are the inflatable dinghies, and you're going to have a pretty good time, particularly this year, which is... The season's pretty weird down there. I've been there, a few times, and it's time of year, but there's a lot of snow this year. So where normally by now penguins need the snow to melt, quite a lot of it to melt,
sure,
so they can gather stones to make their nest. That hasn't happened. In places where I'm familiar with landing on rock, there's still 4 meters of snow. It's extraordinary, so... And it was still snowing, so there's been 1.5 meters of snow in November.
Why? What is this due to?
Well, going back, this wasn't said on this trip, but going back, I've travelled with ice experts and snow experts who have said to me that warming seas create snow in Antarctica because warmer water creates transpiration. You still get the cold wind and you get snow.
Okay.
That wasn't said on this trip, but I've heard that from...
So basically you suspect our old friend climate change might be the culprit here as well.
Yeah. It's an example of one season. So
yes, well, exactly.
So I was travelling with Aurora Expeditions, which is a good Australian company, set up in 1985, been doing this stuff. This is what they do. On the ship, the Greg Mortimer, which is a new style of ship, which has got the crossbow, the Alstein bow, which is... where most ships, the bow goes up and forwards. This goes the other way.
Right, okay.
So it's wave piercing. It's designed to cut through waves and have less yaw and roll and pitch, which are the 3 factors in this.
Yes.
And it's got very good stabilisation, which comes into the latter part of this story. But on the way south, we had a really good run. It was pretty good. But we did have a problem before that because... Aurora has the policy of testing people for COVID before they get on board. And several of the people I was travelling with, I was travelling with a group, and several of them tested positive and had to stay in Ushuaia.
Wow, okay.
So, and look, you can completely understand the perspective. I can understand cruise companies' perspective on this, which is that you're going to the remote place, and bringing a virus on board when you're going to be in a place like that so removed is feels irresponsible in some ways. If you can prevent that, it's got to be a good thing. If you end up with, and given the age of a lot of people who can afford and who do this, if you end up with people on respirators,
yes,
and you have to come back from Antarctica.
Yes, because respirators aren't exactly thick on the ground in Antarctica.
That because if you brought it on board, so I understand the
policy,
the policy of this. But of course, for the people who couldn't get on board, it's pretty disappointing.
Sure.
We under Argentinian rules, you have to isolate, quarantine in a hotel room for 5 days. So I think the lesson here is, whether it's Argentina or you're going to Antarctica or not, somewhere else, is that you need to read, understand the policies of the companies you're travelling with. If their policy is to test for PCR test you before you get on board, or rat test you with a supervised rat test, you need to know that, because you need to really think about the implications of that.
Yeah.
You certainly need good travel insurance that will cover you for that. So it's really important to pay attention to detail at this time. I mean, some cruise companies are not testing. They're just taking everyone on board and accepting there's going to be about 15%.
Sure. Which
seems to be about the current rate on big ships at the moment. And you will be isolated in the cabin for 5 days. So you need to think about those things and say the implications and the policies of the companies and the countries you're going to. You know, Brazil may reintroduce masks again fairly soon because they've got spikes there. So just be aware of that. We are at the tail end of a pandemic, but we are still in this tail end of the pandemic.
Yes, indeed. I admire your optimism.
Yeah, okay. I didn't say how long a tail.
It could be a very long tail.
Could be a long tail. So that's where we are. So some people didn't get on board.
Okay.
We helped to arrange accommodation for them in Ushuaia, and we all talked about it, and they decided, which was my suggestion, to stay in Ushuaia for the 10 days that we were going to be on board.
Yeah, that makes
and travel back with
sense.
The group. Well, trying to get flights out of South America. I mean, you could spend
days trying to do that. Yeah.
What's the point? And I must say, look, the people that were there that I was traveling with were so inspiring. I mean, the way they took it, it's a massive disappointment. The way they took it was incredible. And the way they then made an adventure out of being in Ushuaia, which is the end of the world. I mean, that's their tagline.
Yeah.
And so we're in this incredible place. They did day trips on catamaran to see penguins down the Beagle Channel. You're quite near Cape Horn.
Sure.
They did walks in the Tierra del Fuego National Park up to Emerald Lake and so on, in the local restaurants. And of course, Argentina was playing Poland. Some of them were in a local restaurant that night, and it was a very exciting night. They said, well, you'd never experience this in the World Cup. Eating Chinook salmon, eating Argentinian lamb on a rack. The king crabs are the size of the paper when it's opened out, So they really made something of it, and I admire them very much for the way they took this and handled all of that. The situation for people like that will be that their travel insurance should cover them. It's very important, if your partner decides not to board, that you make sure that your travel insurance covers your partner not to board.
Okay, yeah.
Because they haven't failed a test. So things like that, I really want the listeners to think about all these things and be aware of these things. Generally, I mean, none of this matters quite as much if you're cruising in the Med and, you can be offloaded in Nice or Monaco and whatever it is, but it matters down there. But think about those things. On board, people then started to test positive. And on board, they had to stay in their cabins and isolate for 5 days. So obviously that's a whole different scenario. I must say, Aurora really have been wonderful. They have offered all those people on board who had to isolate another cruise. And I know one couple's, I think, has already booked Costa Rica. So they were very generous in looking after them, considering that they'd had the experience. So yeah, there was a lot going on logistically.
Yeah.
But the Antarctic, I came through it unscathed, as did some large group of our travellers, and we had the most amazing experience. So in Antarctica, you can expect in modern ships a pretty good ride down. The weather patterns go like this. So if you think of Antarctica on the bottom of the planet, and around this you've got the circum-Antarctic polar weather pattern. And if you look from the bottom, it goes clockwise. And it's unimpeded except for squeezing through this pinch point I've just described between the bottom of South America, that big triangle coming down, and the Antarctic Peninsula going up. So the ocean, the weather patterns come from the west or northwest, and they push through this, and of course that speeds up water. It creates swell, helps to create. Not quite true. Only wind creates.
Yeah,
swell, but,
we know what you're saying.
it just all bumps up in there.
Yes.
It speeds the wind up. So this is why you get the weather through the Drake Passage. So modern ships cope with all this pretty well. On the way south, you've kind of got that a bit behind you on the starboard quarter, on the back right side of the boat, pushing you along. So we got down there quickly. Paradise Bay, brilliant. Young couple got engaged. Lots of penguins, lots of snow. I love clean penguins and white snow. Photographer, happy days. Bit of sunshine, beautiful snowstorms, snowshoeing with Aurora, which is fabulous because you can just kind of take off in the group.
Yeah, right.
Up ridges and so on. Great photography. I found photographically, it was a leap of faith, but I was very pleased that I did it. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would never have imagined mostly shooting pictures in Antarctica with a phone. But that's where we are now. I had the iPhone 14 Pro, and I use that for 3/4 of the pictures. I've just bought 2 Canon R7 mirrorless cameras with a 100 to 400 lens, the RF lens, and the short zoom, which is the 18 to 101, whatever it is, 35. I can't remember now. Which I barely use. I didn't really use. I found that the iPhone, for most pictures, was fabulous.
So are you saying that really for the telephoto stuff is where you probably need those long lenses?
It's that last 10%. It's when you really want to pick out penguins and really get to grips with long shots. Maybe.
And so mobile phone cameras are not quite there yet, are
no,
they?
yeah, I mean, the iPhone, the 14, all these modern phones have pretty good zooms now.
Yeah.
They're getting there.
Sure.
But for real long stuff and for really controlling depth of field and so on, But I mean, most the phones are. So really, I was pretty happy with the phone anyway.
Incredible.
And then I just had the RF7 with the R7 with the RF 100-400 little bag, waterproof bag by a company called Overboard in Queensland on my lap. So I had that clipped around my waist.
So very convenient. It's not like you're carting around this big kit or anything.
It was a leap of faith because they're new cameras.
Right, okay.
And, it's pretty risky, but they worked very, very well.
Fantastic.
And the Antarctic experience was great. Then the weather pattern that I've mentioned started to really form. So the weather, as I say, comes in sort of from the northwest, across the bottom of South America, across the Drake Passage. And Captain Klaptenko,
great name.
Captain Klaptenko, put his foot down and off we went. And this is where a ship like the Greg Norman comes into its own because it's a very good vessel. And we got going and they kind of came up. The first day there was a rough crossing. So 7 metres is enough.
So this was your next adventure in a sense, wasn't it?
Yeah, so coming home was the next adventure. I was, being responsible, I suppose, for people. I was very aware of the weather patterns.
Okay.
And they did very well to go, well, we've had a great time. Let's leave the party while we're having fun. The first day, 7 metres, 50 knots of wind. That's enough to let you know that you're in the Drake Passage.
Sure, okay.
It's not as big as I've had there, but, 20 foot in the old money on the beam on the side of the boat is enough to make it move. But he did very well. So we got through that reasonably quickly, and then we're in the kind of the lee almost of South America. And by the afternoon, the second day, it was pretty calm. But, not this behind us. A couple of days behind us was the Viking Polaris, which is Viking's new expedition ship. We've written a lot about this, haven't we, Will?
Absolutely,
we've seen this in the pages. This is the ship that's got new this year. It's got the inboard marina, so they actually bring these Zodiacs, these inflatable boats, inside the ship, and everybody gets out, if you like. That was hit by a rogue wave in the Drake Passage. Viking hasn't said this. I was talking to them yesterday. They haven't actually released this or revealed this, but it has been reported that a window broke when this woke. I'm just picking a finger here, but I can imagine that knowing a rogue wave can be twice the size of a normal wave.
Right, okay.
So you could be looking at 100 tons of water. It seems that, or it's been reported that, in the Argentinian media, that a window broke, but one person died and 4 people were injured in that incident. So this is an American woman who died, and of course you have every sympathy for the family and those connected to those 5 people, but also I have sympathy for everyone else on board, because it would have been pretty traumatic.
Absolutely.
And that would affect your whole...
The last thing you would have expected on a state-of-the-art
Yeah, I've also got a lot of sympathy for
Viking.
the expedition team and the marine team, and for Viking as a company. It's Viking has done everything right through the pandemic.
Yes.
They kept people on. We've been writing about this so much. They
Totally.
Raquel Bono, they they got a very good expert on pandemics. They installed PCR labs on every ship. They kept sailing as much as they could. It's a family-owned business. I mean, Torsten Hagen, who started and still owns the business, will be
devastated.
Devastated.
I'm assuming they'll all be devastated.
So I have sympathy for them too. I think it's just it's a terrible thing all round. It'd be interesting to see what the investigation says.
Sure.
Of course, they then cancelled their next voyage. So you've then got people from due to board and leave on the 5th of December who their voyage was affected, was cancelled. So, you then got a knock-on effect there. And just a few weeks ago, there was a ship called World Explorer, which was back in Ushuaia.
Okay.
And this is a Quark Expeditions ship, and they had a Zodiac which overturned near Elephant Island, which I'm sure lots of listeners will know. That was part of the Sir Ernest Shackleton story. He left from Elephant Island. They were there, and somehow, a Zodiac overturned and 2 people died.
So really another freak incident, because you were saying, at another point we were talking, and it's very difficult to overturn those.
Well, these big Zodiacs that they have on these ships, and there's 15 on Greg Mortimer, they have 7 inflatable compartments, so they're not little runabouts. They normally take 8 or 10 people plus the crew member with the outboard, who's running the outboard. So they're big things. They have 7 compartments. They're designed that if one gets deflated, it will still float, and 2 gets deflated, it will still float. That's what these brilliant Zodiacs do. Yeah. Turning one over I can't think of ever hearing of that before, actually. But, look, the water there, we had 40 people do the polar plunge on the Greg Mortimer.
Right.
And honestly, 5 seconds in the water and they're basically verging on hypothermic, that water, if you're in the water without a dry suit, and then even if you've got back in a righted in another Zodiac, you'd have to do that within seconds. Really.
Yeah.
I can imagine, particularly if you're older or something, if you're in the water, you're more vulnerable. If you're in the water for a minute, it would just suck it out of you. So these are, Antarctica is, we read about Shackleton, Scott, Amundsen, all the dramas, the endurance, the Scott story. It's the same place. Just because we've, this kind of luxury expedition thing has been tagged to it, that it's now a luxury holiday. Well, it's still Antarctica. It's the story of these great dramatic adventures and disasters. And we're going there for fun. It is the same place. The Drake Passage is the Drake Passage. And even if you put a 200-meter ship like Viking Polaris there, it looks ever so small in a big ocean.
Right, okay. Well, of course, yes.
Of course.
It's the ocean.
So I'm just
vast.
making the point that, we're choosing to go to dramatic places and with dramatic elements, and that comes with personal risk. And, I also feel there's a personal element to all of this story. We've just talked about getting there and getting back, Will, and I think that before you go, you need to understand that you will be on 8 flights if you're going to this sort of place. You will be in airports for 4 or 6 hours in between, waiting for connections.
Yeah.
You will be in a queue for an hour and a half. You will be carrying your bag. You'll be amongst pickpockets. The pickpockets in Buenos Aires now, they actually join the queues.
Right, okay.
So they stand in the queue and kind of help themselves to, while everyone's looking for stuff.
Yeah.
And then when they get to the front to be seated, they just run off. So, there's pickpockets everywhere, particularly at the moment. You will be carrying your bag, you'll be walking long distances in airports, you'll be sitting waiting, and, you need to be mentally fit, ready for that, and ready to go out and engage with the world. But you also need to be physically fit. And I just really encourage people to think about the work of travel, that you'll be carrying a bag that you normally wouldn't carry, and you'll be arriving at a hotel late at night.
Yeah, the whole process is exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah. So just
question.
we're back out doing big trips, and they come with their responsibilities as well.
They come with their baggage, if one could say.
Yeah. So that's travel as we speak.
Yeah. Well, thank you for painting such a varied portrait.
Look, I had an amazing time. I think it's kind of interesting being out there at the moment. We're traveling the world and doing big trips at the moment, and I love that. I love being back out. There were times when I never thought, during the pandemic, those deep moments when we were all locked up at home, I never thought I'd see South America again.
Right. Okay.
I'm flying over the Andes.
Yes.
I just was mesmerised. That flight between Santiago and Buenos Aires. I thought, wow, I'm back here. I'm walking around Buenos Aires,
Who would have thought?
sitting in a park, seeing the San Martin statue, and walking down 9th of July Avenue. I just loved being there, and Louis and Lucas, the guy, the concierge, and this and that. It was fantastic to be there. Those beautiful buildings. So it's exciting to be in the world again.
Wow. So listeners can read all about this and more in this Saturday's West Australian travel section. And beyond, in fact. I think you've got a stockpile of stories.
Yes, amongst it, I wrote 14 stories.
Yeah, well, there you go. And which does not surprise me, given what you've just told us. There's a lot to write about.
Yeah, and individual places like, Fort LaCroix, which was the first full-time British base. We visited there. It's a living museum now.
Right.
So lots of individual stories.
Sure.
Places that you might be in, that show the interest, show the history of this place too. So, yeah, it's a very exciting trip. Lots of content.
Lots of photographs, so we get to see that.
Lots of photographs.
How you gave that iPhone a really serious workout. We'll get to see the results of that.
Yeah, it's very pleasing.
Well, amazing. Well, Stephen, so good to have you back, safe and sound.
Good to
Thanks
be
for being
back,
on the pod, well travelled, and we'll catch up again next week.
Thanks, Will.
Okay, bye now.